It's 2022. Access to Tokusatsu has never been more convenient, from the physical media being released for obscure shows to the multitude of streaming services and other very legal ways of watching online. I'm not watching any of this. I'm gonna go watch a history of video instead. Despite the popularity and reach of Tokusatsu being what I would consider higher than it's ever been, there's still many who, despite being active in the fandom, don't actually watch many Tokusatsu shows. And that's not to shame them, don't get me wrong, especially when you consider their reasoning for not to watch them. To those who are new to Toku, seasons seem too intimidating to pick up and watch, given how long overall seasons are, let alone their franchises. And that's not even counting their extra material to individual seasons such as movies, specials, or novels. You probably watched a particular Tokusatsu that made you say, this is great, I wish this could go on forever. I get that sentiment, and I've probably had those moments before too, but I don't know if I'd like for my favorite tokus to last forever. They probably wouldn't be my favorites anymore. There are plenty of really satisfying endings to seasons that I would hold in high regard. So that begs the question, how long should a Tokusatsu season be? The most obvious answer I could say is, a season should be as long as the story writer wants it to be. But I want to ask something more than that, something that sits well with the viewers of these seasons. How long should a season be? And most importantly, how much is too much? Let's go back to the beginning. Yes, I really mean the beginning. And here I'm asking you to picture yourself in the time period. Living in Japan in 1958, you'd probably know about the three treasures that were the hot items when it came to household appliances, which are a refrigerator, a washing machine, and a black and white television. All were trendy, yet all were exceedingly expensive. A TV could cost around 120,000 yen, when the average salary was 18,500 yen a month. Though the percentage of TV owners in Japan were dwarfed in comparison to the United States at the time, the outreach of television sets was high. They could be seen in windows at department stores downtown, and if you were a kid at that time, you'd probably gather in a group at your friend's household who happened to have a set. If you tuned into Channel 6, you'd probably see Gekko Kamen, translated as Moonlight Mask. This show aired from February 24th, 1958 to the 5th of July in 1959, with a whopping 130 episodes, with an average of airing twice a week. That was normal for the time, as these were time slots made to advertise for sponsors. It was an equivalent to the US's own serialized dramas at the time, or soap operas, which was also true for the show's low budgets. And it was monumental to the foundations of Tokusatsu as a whole. But that was at a time where you could just tune into the program on those days as an event. It didn't matter if the budget was low or the stories weren't, well, good at all, but the excitement of watching a superhero fight evil on screen made viewers forget about those aspects. As the years went on, faith built up for television, and as important events such as the royal wedding of Akihito and Michiko were televised, sets were becoming more and more commonplace. This allowed for studios such as Tsuburaya to be given airtime with higher budgets for shows than ever before. Ultra Q in 1966 was said to be the most expensive program to produce, only to be dwarfed by their own Ultraman and Ultra 7 in the couple of years after that. But with these budgets for programs getting higher and higher, the production of them had to be cut down. Ultra Q and Ultraman aired 28 and 39 episodes respectively, and Ultra 7 got by with a regular full television season with 49 episodes, though only because it was popular enough as well given enough time to be produced. People also seem to forget the series Captain Ultra, which aired in the time slot filled in by Ultraman in the hiatus between that and Ultra 7. But like Gekko Kamen before them, these were essentially shows without meaningful narrative threads. You could tune into a new episode without worrying about having seen the one before. Television production around this time was also lengthy and labor intensive, but all of that would change in 1971 with Kamen Rider. 98 episodes were aired between April 3rd of that year and February 10th of 1973. Not only was Kamen Rider popular, but it was relatively cheap to make and new episodes could be produced quickly. The way Kamen Rider Nigo was introduced as a character is a testament to just how quickly and efficiently Toei was churning them out. The cycle of production meeting demand would continue on in Go Ranger with 84 episodes. Of course, these are real pillars of Japanese pop culture here, so criticizing these shows on their merit alone is really hard to do. It's like watching think Battleship Potemkin in that you recognize all the things that make them iconic, but they're hard to compare to modern production standards. One of the most apparent standards of modern tokusatsu is that seasons should consist of 45 to 52 episodes, though I think it's way too much. Now of course, that number is a lot less daunting when you're actively watching week to week as it's airing. After the shows are wrapped though, it can be easy to see that 52 episode number and decide against diving in. That's not an issue specific to Toku though. The same can be said about anime, manga, or really any piece of media. Length can be a real turnoff, especially if you're an adult with very little free time to spare. Let's ask another question though. Of the 50-ish episode Toku seasons, how many of them are worth the time investment? Or rather, how many of them really justify their length? Back to familiar territory here, Kamen Rider has always tended to, at least in the fans' eyes, consist of short peaks and long valleys. Hypothetically, if a season had 5 meh episodes for every great one, would all of those sections of fluff be purely necessary? In Kamen Rider Hibiki, for example, it's easy to pinpoint the moment where things took a real turn for the worse. Episode 29, Kagayaku Shonen. This was the last episode to feature producer Shigenori Takatera and the writing crew of Tsuyoshi Kida and Shinji Oishi. Every episode of the season afterward would be produced by Shirokura and written by Toshiki Inoue. We've been over this story plenty of times on the channel, but I tend to agree with the opinion that the first half of Hibiki was a masterpiece and the rest is simply not as good. If Hibiki started as a 29 episode peak, followed by a 20 episode valley, would it not have been better as a shorter, more focused story? That's not the best example, of course. Hibiki was more of a case of creative control being wrestled from the original creator of a work, but the point still stands. Did Hibiki really need to trudge along for as long as it did? Another example of this is Kamen Rider Kabuto. A common sentiment in the community is that Kabuto's later episodes see a noticeable dip in quality, and while I enjoy them personally, it's easy to see where the complaint comes from. It definitely slows down at least. But unlike Hibiki, there's not one single factor we can point to as to where this dip in quality came from. The head writer of the season, Shoji Yonemura, wrote it from start to end, which is a little ironic given that he was part of Hibiki's replacement staff. If the creative reins didn't change hands, why does the latter half of the season feel so sluggish in comparison to the first? Did they just run out of steam? Or more worryingly, did they slow down the show's pace in order to stretch its story to hit 50-some episodes? Then there's one of the more controversial opinions, which would be that Kamen Rider Build's first half is the peak. Some would even argue that the rest is not worth watching. Heck, that's not even what the other half. Actually, people say that the very first arc, from the first episode up to episode 14, is all you need to watch. Really? I mean, it's great and all, but right before Kazumine appears and the Crow Trio, you're telling me I should watch up to the episode where Bloodstock's identity is revealed and nothing after that? Well, obviously I can easily disagree with that opinion entirely. I was satisfied by the first arc well enough, but I said before that the rest of the show is much better. However, you can start to see where the problems are. These seasons are on a case-by-case basis, which does not help a first-time viewer to Tokusatsu. I can definitely see why arguing about parts to an overall season would probably make someone discourage them from seeing it at all. That's not even counting the numerous V-Cinemas, movies, or specials that these shows may entail, especially in Kamen Rider Build's case. So, objectively, these seasons are still around 50 episodes long. What about shows that are way shorter than that? Starting in 2013, Ultraman came back in television with new stories, not with a bang per se, but with a modest 11 episodes. This kind of evokes Super Rai's original conditions, where they were working with what they had, and they simply couldn't hold out the full television season that other shows were meeting. That would take time and a hefty budget, which Super Raya was rightfully skeptical about. They had mainly wanted to test the waters with a small, complete story that was easy to produce. Whether you like the season or not, 11 episodes is pretty digestible no matter how you look at it. Ginga S, its sequel, would extend that number to 16 episodes. Ultraman X would last for 22 episodes, and finally, Ultraman Orb would find Super Rai's most consistent format with 25 episodes. Being half of an average Kamen Rider or Super Sentai season, you can't beat that. Speaking of which, I haven't really mentioned Super Sentai too much because it's extremely episodic. Aside from examples like Live Man or Die Ranger, Sentai works on a formula that you can pick up any episode from start to finish, aside from the literal beginning and endings, and you wouldn't have to become too invested as there aren't any arcs to speak of. Generally generally. You can make the argument that you can fall back on Sentai for some tokusatsu that you don't have to think too much about, which is pretty good on its own. But there's another franchise where investment matters, and it can pay off to watch across many different seasons in their respective timelines. That would be Keita Amamiya's Garo. Entries in the franchise consist of usually 12 and 25 episode long seasons, plus individual movies. All are fantastic watches with beautiful designs, incredible characters, and storylines that will leave you amazed just by the scope of it. So let's talk about the one Garo season that is not connected to anything, Garo vs. Road. It's what I would consider to be the sleeper hit of 2020. With a high bar that Garo has set before this entry, you'd be surprised to know that vs. Road is one of the best from the franchise. It details a group of players of a VR game that kills them in real life, a battle royale where the victor becomes a titular Garo. It has so many characters, a lot which you will fall in love with, but no, it's not obvious who becomes Garo. With only a few out-of-suit fights, and only one real CGI battle, you'd wonder if you're even watching a tokusatsu at this point, but it is. I know one major complaint about Toku in general is that it's all just toy commercials, but I really don't think you can say the same about vs. Road, as in, I don't think it has a single toy release from it at all, which sucks cause the suit is awesome. I didn't even mention the fight choreography. It's among the best that Tokusatsu ever offered, and it's only 12 episodes. Short, sweet, and maybe a little complex. It's my favorite Toku of 2020. Definitely check this one out, whether you're only after short Tokusatsu or not. Now, on the exact other end of that spectrum, Kamen Rider Ex-Aid. Yes, Ex-Aid. Let's see. 45 episodes, 7 movies, 5 web series, 4 specials, a novel, a Hong Kong manga, and a pretty embarrassing abridged series that I swear it wasn't. Wait, Liz, did you just write this? Okay, I swear, I skimmed through the script, I did not see this, so what the heck? How could you? I can't begin to talk about Ex-Aid again. With the amount of content in this century of Kamen Rider, even to this day, it's downright terrifying to a newcomer to Tokusatsu. Don't get me wrong, Ex-Aid is actually one of my favorites. It has a time and place in my position in this community that's irreplaceable. But do I recommend it? It's one of those shows that definitely overstayed its welcome, and sure, after watching the whole season, you'd probably be satisfied from seeing gaps being filled in from the Ex-Aid trilogy, or even in places you didn't even question. Who knew that Dan Kuruto, an eccentric billionaire and CEO, would try to replace Gayamatsu in his career as another eccentric billionaire and CEO? These spin-offs are great in their own way, and True Ending happens to be one of my favorite Rider movies, but sad to say, it's completely unnecessary. However, is the base Kamen Rider Ex-Aid season worth the watch? Sure, although there's plenty of filler with the monster, or rather Patient of the Week formula, and there are some arcs that drag pretty hard. So when you compare Ex-Aid with what I just told you to the 12 episode long Garo vs. Road, what do you think I'd say about that? Well, again, it's case by case, but typically, I honestly prefer shorter seasons to longer ones, subjectively speaking of course, but I really do feel like you get more out of a tighter amount of episodes than 50 which are made to be shown weekly. A modern Ultraman season is half of a Rider season, there's no getting around that. That's not to say you still don't get anything from Rider, and it does feel like Kamen Rider is only getting even more popular as the years go on. However, you gotta understand that Kamen Rider and Super Sentai are made to be weekly ongoing shows. They aren't going away anytime soon. Although, it really would be nice to get another original and short season like Kamen Rider Amazons. Also Gaim. Gaim is good. So back to our original questions. How long should a Tokusatsu season be? And how much is too much? Don't let me get in the way between something that seems cool to you. If you're interested in big seasons with lots of side content, then please, go for the long seasons. If you're into shorter seasons with complete stories, check out vs. Road as I mentioned earlier, or any other Garos for that matter, or Amazons. And hey, if you're into anime with Tokusatsu flair, you could check out SSS Gridman, as well as its sequel, Dynazenon. Both are 12 episodes each. So I personally haven't seen either of them, but Liz recommends them highly, so there you go. So to me, the perfect length would be something like Garo or Ultraman, anything from 12 to 25 episodes. Shows that get up to 50 episodes, plus more than one movie, that's when I start to say, yeah, this is too much. But as always, I recommend you look out for any Tokusatsu that looks cool to you. With all that being said, I've been trying to broaden my horizons past Tokusatsu, and I've been recommended this one kind of like Toku's show called Breaking Bad. Season 5, Part 1 and 2? Soon.